Hey guys, it's Mark from The Abstract. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about triads and their inversions. For those of you who have no idea what an inversion is, they are very important when it comes to writing music and spelling out chords. Let's turn over to the keyboard to show you what I mean. Music demands a certain sense of smoothness. If you're writing a song that contains 4 chords, C, G, D, and A, you want to be able to write those chords in a way where you don't have to make these big jumps like my hand was doing. If you notice, my hand physically had to move down the keyboard to play these different chords. In most popular music, you don't hear that sense of awkwardness because there are other ways to demonstrate these chords without having to make big jumps, and that's where inversions come into play. There are 3 different types of inversions when it comes to triads. The most popular one is root position. Root position chords are spelled out with the root of the chord on the bottom, followed by the 3rd and the 5th stacked on top of it. Doesn't matter whether it's a minor chord, major chord, augmented chord, it doesn't matter. It just has to do with the positioning in relationship to its root. So right here in the session, I've loaded up a D major chord in root position. Why in root position? Because D is the root, followed by the 3rd, which is F sharp, and A, which is the 5th, the perfect 5th. And if we play it together, it's going to sound like this. Very strong D major chord. However, there are different types of inversions that you could write to represent a D major chord without playing it in root position. If you were to bring the root of the chord up an octave, it's still going to be a D major chord, whereas before, it's still a D major chord, but spelled out differently. Whereas before it was in root position with the D on the bottom. Now we're moving it up to the top. And the key command to move a MIDI event up an octave is to hold down Shift, Option, and then press the up arrow. And it'll move up an octave from the point where you are. So if we play this chord again, it's going to sound like a D major chord, but a different position. And this position is known as first position, where the 3rd of the chord is on the bottom. As you notice, F sharp is on the bottom, followed by the 5th, followed by the root on the top. It's still a D major chord, but spelled out differently. And there's one more type of inversion, one that involves the chord building off of the 5th, and that's second inversion. Let's take the F sharp, which is the 3rd of the D major chord, and move it up an octave. Shift, Option, up arrow. And now we have A being the 5th with the root in the middle and the 3rd on top. And it's still going to sound like D major, but in a different position on the keyboard. So the reason, again, that these inversions are very important is if you want to include chord progressions where one chord would turn into another chord, you want to have to make big leaps. So if I were to set up another track, and to set up another track, I'm going to duplicate this track by holding down Command and pressing D, and it'll duplicate my piano track that I had up above and keep all the parameters from it as well. So I'm not going to change anything. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this event down, and I'm going to change this chord. I'm going to make it a C first inversion chord. So that means the 3rd is going to be on the bottom. The 3rd of a C major chord is E. So first thing, I'm going to move this down to E, with the 5th being G, and the root being C. We'll mute the previous track. This is what a first inversion C major chord sounds like. So if we want to take this chord and resolve to a D major chord, there are ways to do that where we don't have to move very much. We know the notes of a D major chord are D, F sharp, and A. So we have to be able to move very little distances from these notes to achieve the smoothness in the chord. And there are multiple ways to get a D major chord. It's not always going to result in the same type of inversion. That's really up to you. But at the end of the day, you do want smoothness. So if we are moving from C major to D major, one example we could do is we can move the root. We can keep the root here. And we know that the D major chord also includes an A and an F sharp. So what you might want to do is move a very small distance from G up to A, and then move this E up to the F sharp. So when we had before was a first inversion C chord with the third on the bottom, resolving to a first position or first inversion chord with the F sharp on the bottom for D major. A first inversion to another first inversion. It wouldn't make as much sense for this particular example if this D was down here, because it's a big jump from this C. However, if you were to think about it in reverse, this chord could technically work because the distance between C in this chord and the A in this chord is only a minor third. So it's not like you had to jump very far. But an even smoother transition would probably be if you put the D up here. So you can have a smooth transition from this note to this note to this note, and this note to this note. If I were to now build a root position C chord like this, you would probably think about it a little bit differently. Now there's a big gap between this note and this note. You probably don't want that. This is what that will sound like. And although in some cases that's a cool sound, if we're trying to achieve smoothness between these chords, we probably want to resolve it a little bit differently. And we probably want to bring this root of the D major chord down an octave. So now we have complete smoothness all around, from C root position to D root position. Now let me show you how to play these different types of inversions on the keyboard. Here is D major in root position. The D is on the bottom, which is the root. F sharp is the third. A is the fifth. Without changing the chord, all I'm going to do is move the D up an octave. So right here, keep the F sharp and the A in place, and we now have a first position D chord. Now if I wanted to make it a second position or second inversion D chord, we move the F sharp up an octave, keeping the A and the D in place, which would sound like this. So now the three back to back. They're all D major. But like I said, depending on the chords that you're using and the chord progression that you're using, you want to determine what would be the best chord position to resolve to, whether it be root position, first position, second position. Your compositions will tell you what would be best. But for now, just know that there are different ways to spell these chords without them always being in the common root position. If this is a little difficult to grasp, don't worry. It is a rather strange concept, but feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help you out. Stay tuned for the next lesson on seventh chord inversions.